This week we're talking about the wild robot, and I am a wild animal. See? Hi, welcome to Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell. So, I'm gonna be real, this movie, I was very aware of its existence. It nearly slipped me by, but then my brother insisted that he wanted to go see it. So, I did eventually check it out with him, and it's so good. So, without further ado, this is The Wild Robot. Based off the popular book series by Peter Brown, The Wild Robot follows a robot named Roz, played by Lupita Nyong'o, shipwrecked on a deserted island. Building relationships with the native animals, Roz soon becomes the adoptive mother of an orphaned goose. Now, when it comes to Dreamworks' animated catalog, they have a lot of classic movies that have stuck with us throughout childhood, at least within my age bracket. But then they also have a lot of nightmare-fueled, bizarre movies that just shouldn't exist, but yet here they are. But thankfully now, I think we are starting to enter a really interesting era with Dreamworks. It started with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and now, after Kung Fu Panda 4, we are onto The Wild Robot, which I think will be destined to be a Dreamworks classic. There is a lot of excellent voice work within this movie, but I truly think the standout, it is Lupita Nyong'o as Roz. She manages to capture, within just the same tone of voice, this innocence within this robot that doesn't really know the world around her, but even with the same tone throughout the whole movie, there is room for the character to grow and for more of a personality to develop over time. And one of the things to really look out for in any animated movie, and it's the point of praise or critique, it's the animation. How well is it done? And I think that Dreamworks, they have been on a roll lately. The Wild Robot, it continues to use some of the similar art style from Puss in Boots, but I think that they make it look so much like a painting. It is so unique. It is so gorgeous. My initial concern coming into this movie was that it would be too much like a WALL-E knockoff, or like it's something that I would have seen a million times over. But thankfully, I think it does enough different to stand out on its own. Because while you could say it's a story about friendship, and it certainly is, I think it's also a story about parenthood, about acceptance, and especially within this day and age where everything is divided, finding a common ground and fellowship within your own community. And I definitely think that is a story we need now more than ever. Another thing that I certainly appreciate about this movie compared to other animated movies is that it does take a bit of a risk with the jokes. You get quite a bit of edgy jokes. Now, it's not on the same level of Shrek, where it's laid within sexual innuendo and pop culture, but this one, it's very, very dark, some of the humor. It's almost like a Looney Tunes cartoon in some ways. But I think at the same time, it's not so gratuitous that it turns everybody off. I hope you're enjoying the review so far, so please, if you can, share this video, like, and subscribe. Any support that you can give would be greatly appreciated. And now, let's get back to the stash. Going into the mixed, in the very beginning of this movie, I was extremely concerned because it was chase scene after chase scene after chase scene. I was concerned that that was going to be how the movie was for most of the runtime. At the very beginning of the film, it just seemed very flashy and overstimulating, and it went on for quite a while, it felt. So I was very concerned that this would be most of the runtime, which, if that's the case, I'm just gonna have a headache. But thankfully, the chase scenes kind of died down. Once Roz becomes familiar with the environment, the film sort of slows down. It's a slower movie, and I do appreciate that a whole lot more. They use the overstimulation to work within the POV of Roz first arriving, and in that case, I do think that it is purposeful. I think that the general voice work was pretty good all around. But if there's one performance that I felt was just a little iffy, it was Pedro Pascal as Fink the Fox. I don't even blame Pedro Pascal for this, because I do think he gave a pretty solid performance, and he worked really well with Lupita Nyong'o. But the character felt very derivative of what Zootopia did with Nick Wilde. Just from the overall voice to even sort of the arc, it just felt a little too derivative, and it definitely stood out in my mind. I didn't hate the character, but it did still feel kind of like a knockoff to me. And while the third act, it could be verbatim with what the novel had. I don't know, I didn't read it. The ending, to me, it just felt a little too flashy with what came before, because for a kids movie, it's pretty meticulous with its sort of slow pacing. It's simple, it's calm. And I guess you need a finale, but to me, it was just very, very flashy compared to everything that came before. And with that in mind, there wasn't really an antagonist throughout this movie. The antagonist was really time. That was the real enemy, so to kind of force in a villain at the very, very end, to me it felt a little forced. But I don't think it detracts too much from the overall experience. Oh! Do you know what that means? That means it's time for intermission. Anyway, jeez, you know, I feel like I haven't done a popcorn review in like forever. When was the last time I've done a popcorn review? Oh jeez, man, that was a while ago. That was a while ago. Well, we're gonna have to make up for that. So, the popcorn that I'm trying this week, you might have seen within my Nightmare on Elm Street review. It is the nacho jalapeno popcorn. I actually am gonna try it this time. I tied down the popcorn that's gonna try to kill me, so I should be safe to eat it. So you smell a little bit of the cheese. It's nothing too crazy, but you do taste the jalapeno, but I hate to say it, I'm a little disappointed with this popcorn. Like, it's good popcorn, but it tastes way too much like the pizza popcorn. There's not much distinguishing it, unfortunately. So I would have to give this one about a 5 out of 10. Oh well. Man, that's really disappointing. After I almost get killed for it too. Diving into my negatives, and there really isn't a whole lot of negatives, which I think is a pretty good indicator for children's media. This is more a complaint I have with kids media in general, especially animated movies, but they have really good scores, some of these movies, and in particular, this one has a pretty great score. I kind of wish that they just used the score for the general soundtrack. Now, I know that is the typical business model to include some pop songs, and this one, I will at least give them, they don't use too many pop songs, but for some crucial moments, they do use a pop song that you would hear on the radio, and I didn't feel like it was necessary. It would have been more timeless if you included the instrumental score that you made for this movie. It will date it maybe a little bit, but then again, maybe not. I mean, Shrek is immortalized for All-Stars, so I mean, this I'm sure will be fine. But in the end, I think this movie is destined to become a new Dreamworks classic. There were a couple moments where I had the chills. Unfortunately, I am a robot. I didn't cry at all during this. I almost did, but I got more chills than anything. This movie ends in a perfect place where I honestly don't think it needs a sequel, but seeing as how this movie, its budget was considerably low, and it's kind of a sleeper hit that's been continually raking in money due to positive word of mouth, I definitely think a new one is on the way. And if it could be as good as this movie, I'm all on board. I definitely would like to see more of this. I would give this movie a solid 8 out of 10. For this week's recommendation, I think that The Wild Robot, it would make for an excellent double feature if you pop in 1999's The Iron Giant. They do cover some similar ground, but there are plenty of differences, but I do think that this is the modern iteration of The Iron Giant, and I would check out the original. Well, that's all the time we have for today here at Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and if you excuse me, I gotta add to the stash.